What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction. Back with a reaction that has been waiting for some time, and in that regard, I'd like to give a big shout out to friend and champion of the channel, Nigel, who shared a great many things a couple years ago, including the Tory deep dive, for example, as well as a Lucky Dip folder, and I think I've downloaded that. I couldn't find it, and in fact, I reached out to Nigel earlier tonight, and I've yet to hear back. But if you are still around, I do appreciate not only the material, but the patience. And one of the things he shared was Visage, or is it pronounced Visage? Like, Visage as a reference to a face, that's how I'd be inclined to pronounce it. But I've also heard the word said as Visage. So, in terms of this synth pop group, I don't quite know what pronunciation to use. In any case, I'll say Visage in this video. But yes, we're going to listen to Fade to Grey, which I believe is from 1980. I do also have access to an extended mix, but I figured I'd start with the regular version, maybe the single version, I'm not sure. But yes, I briefly just looked on Wikipedia just to get a quick sense of what year the track was from, and apparently this is, as I said, from 1980, and Visage is considered one of the embodiments of the new romantic movement, which again, it was more about style from what I understand than music per se, but it was associated with some of the early 80s acts. I remember when I went through the Duran Duran catalog, people mentioned they were kind of lumped into that, even though their association with it was more limited in terms of the time frame, and shortly after, they began wearing clothes stylings that were not so much what had become defined by the new romantic movement. In any case, Fade to Grey, the idea of not fading to black, which would mean coming to an end in some presentation or some show, a scene coming to an end by fading to black, and thus leaving things maybe ambiguous or implied rather than explicitly shown. But Fade to Grey, there's a suggestion maybe that it's less clear, like even less clear than fading to black. I don't quite know what to make of it, but I like the play on words, because fade to black is something you often hear, especially again in artistic or creative theatrical context. So fading to gray, I do wonder what the meaning might be. Let's see what I can catch on a first listen. This is Visage, or maybe Visage, and the track is Fade to Grey, which, as I said, I believe is from 1980. Grey. Yeah, that's really cool, and I love that early 80s synth sound, and there's so many layers, like there's that very intense and frenetic, essentially the bass line, the heavier synth run that pervades mostly the entire track. Then there's those pad synths, which have maybe not like a choral synth sound, but they certainly have this, what's the right word? Like foundational or like steady sound throughout the tune. Then there's some different note based or like dancing synth lines on top of that, and then by the end there was even like a string synth, a violin synth that was very elegant. And yeah, definitely it feels like more of a vibes tune, an atmosphere tune, rather than any particular narrative. Now, I couldn't tell if the female, I think it was a female voice, was speaking French or like English in a very French accent. I think she was actually speaking French, though I'm not certain of that because I couldn't quite pick out any words, and maybe that's an indication that it was actually French. Nevertheless, it feels like the male vocals are basically just saying, "We fade to gray." So, again, I'm guessing there's not a full story unfolding here, more like, lines, refrains that give us a vibe, give us an atmosphere, but not, again, like a character-driven story. Nevertheless, I really enjoy the composition. Again, it's got an early 80s feel, and like in one or two ways it's making me think of some of the stuff that I've been going through from Newman, where again it sounds late 70s, early 80s, but in a really dynamic and innovative way. But again, maybe not quite the same sound, but either way, I totally get why this would have been a hit, why this would have caught people's ear, and I do enjoy, like, I don't know, maybe it is a drum machine, but I was thinking, especially when that snare came in, that it sounds like natural drums, but doing like a dance floor rhythm with that steady kick drum and, the offset hats and the snare. So, yes, maybe it was a drum machine, but it felt almost like the sonic styling was drums, physical, playing a drum machine style rhythm, and thus it felt like a dance floor tune but with a bit more of a natural sound in the percussion. So again, maybe I'm wrong about that, but either way, very compelling. As I said, I have access to the extended mix, and in the moment I'm thinking maybe, is it Solo? I think maybe Solo has shared this group with me. Give me one moment to investigate, because I can look this up pretty quickly. Okay, so not in this folder, so maybe not. Again, there's some other things, and it's Solo, if you end up watching this, I am well aware, like I'm, looking at some of this stuff, Sparks, I did start going through Fad Gadget, though I'm a little delayed on getting back to that, so I'll try to catch up on that soon. But yes, ultimately, I feel like there is someone else, maybe, who has shared Visage with me, so maybe Visage. Again, you'll have to let me know about that pronunciation, but let me just check one more thing while we're here, just to make sure that I don't already have access to anything else from this group, duo. Yeah, I don't see it here either. So ultimately, I will do my best to catch up on some of this stuff, from everybody, but as I said, I've been looking through this huge folder of stuff that Solo shared a while back, because I feel like this is the kind of thing that I would expect to find in folders that he has shared. Nevertheless, thank you again to Nigel, and if you are still around, mea culpa. I've been trying to catch up on things these last few months that were delayed for a very long time and, ultimately fell off my radar a bit. Again, I run this channel and my Patreon just by my little self, and my memory has famously not always been entirely reliable, so I do my best, but some things do slip off. So as I said, if you're still here, thank you for both the music and the patience. In any case, I'm curious to hear what people have to say. I feel like this is the kind of track, if it was as much of a hit as it seemed to suggest on Wikipedia, because when I looked up the group, it said that this is the hit they're mostly known for, so I'm guessing it charted, and ultimately I understand why, given the sonics and the really dynamic synth production we just heard. So let me know what you think, and I will see you for the next one. Peace.